You are listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. I believe that we are collectively in the midst of one of the most significant disorientations in modern history. And we're going to pull cards to see how that might impact our sense of self. Sometime early last year, I listened to an interview with Jessica Dorr and philosopher Ami Harbin, and they were discussing Harbin's book, Disorientation and Moral Life, which explores themes around disorientation, which Harbin describes as a major disruption in our life, which could be something like a trauma, illness, political climates, loss, anything that shakes up life in a way that causes us to feel uncertain about who we might be moving forward. After listening to this interview, I immediately bought Harbin's book and started devouring it. One of the things that makes Disorientation and Moral Life by Harbin so compelling is that it asks us to reconsider this very experience of disorientation, especially since we tend to view it as something to fix or solve. But Harbin instead argues that disorientation can be a morally significant experience that's actually capable of reshaping how we understand ourselves, how we understand other people, and how we relate to the world around us. As both a psychotherapist and tarot practitioner, I found myself repeatedly thinking about tarot and how tarot at its best does not only provide us a sense of orientation, but when it's used to its fullest benefit, also disrupts it. Many people come to tarot hoping to find answers, hoping to feel a sense of certainty. They want to know what decision to make, whether someone loves them, or what comes next in life. And those of us who read for others often have this inherent urge to answer those questions for them and figure out how they can seek certainty. And as therapists, we also experience this pretty much daily. A client might come in and say, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what to do. And clinically, we can be tempted to help them regain some sort of stability and problem solve as quickly as possible. We want to help organize thoughts and regulate emotions and identify coping skills and, establish routines and all the things. And all of those interventions are important. But Harbin raises an uncomfortable but incredibly important question. What if we rush too quickly towards coherence? Or what if the disorientation itself actually has something to teach us? And through these questions, I'm reminded about how transformative working with the cards and even therapy can be when we don't get clear answers or a path forward. Instead, sometimes the most transformative experiences are when the personal narratives that we're so familiar with become interrupted, when our behavior and thought patterns are shown to us in new ways, and when we're kind of forced to consider different possibilities about who we are or how we can show up in the world that maybe we hadn't thought about before. Or honestly, just allowing ourselves to be witnessed in the discomfort of it all. I think there's also so much discourse on the concept of integration and individuation, both clinically and in the tarot and occult worlds, especially with Jungian folks. And I get it. I talk about it too. I do think it's an important part of the human experience. But I really enjoy that Harbin kind of discourages this rushing forward towards movement and certainty or coherence, and instead suggests that we linger, maybe at least temporarily, in the space of disorientation or disintegration. As I was reading all of this, I couldn't stop thinking about the Five of Cups and the Tower, two cards that I think probably spark the most intense feelings of disorientation. I mean, you could probably throw the Three of Swords in there, but for me personally, I think of the Tower and the Five of Cups. And with the Five of Cups specifically, it's interesting because so many folks see this card and their immediate reaction is just turn around. You still have two cups left. And I feel like this is such a perfect depiction of what Harbin is talking about, because we are saying, hey, don't stay in this space of disorientation. Let's quickly move you out of it. And often the people who are saying just turn around, you still have two cups left, they might think that they're saying this from a place of care and compassion. But chances are, if you were to sit down with them and really unravel where this is coming from, we would probably discover that they are incredibly uncomfortable with somebody else's discomfort. And so what they're doing in this moment by saying, oh, just hurry up and turn around, you still have two cups left, they are trying to avoid their own discomfort around the concept of disorientation. And yes, it's true. There are still two cups left. But I think when we are so quick to say turn around, we are being dismissive. We're bypassing the pain that's happening right now. And I think the people who are uncomfortable with other people's pain or other people's discomfort are so eager to get them past that. Whereas for me, I'm looking at this card and I'm thinking, hold on, this person is not ready to turn around. This person is experiencing something. They are in a moment. We could potentially be pulling them away from honoring their grief or pulling them away from something that they need to experience in order to move forward in the next phase of their life. And how dare us take that away from them? That's not our place. And how dare us take that away from ourselves? So this isn't even have to just be about reading for other people. This could be about reading for ourselves and how important it is when you are working with the cards to not just listen to one or two people's interpretations of a card. And this is why the way I work with tarot honestly kind of frustrates some people or annoys some people, because I'm so unafraid to explore multiple possibilities of a card beyond its traditional interpretation. I honestly don't care about the traditional interpretations. They certainly exist as a foundational component for me, but I let my mind and my human experience and my curiosity go wherever it needs to go. And I think what happens in the case of this Five of Cups is that collectively we get stuck on hearing someone say, oh, just hurry up and turn around. You have two cups. Don't forget about those. And then that is what we as a group have determined that card means when we pull it. And so then that's what we say. We just recite the thing that we have been seeing and hearing over and over again. And we forget that we are allowed to question these interpretations and wonder what else could be happening here. And in the case of Harbin's work on disorientation, we're actually encouraged to maybe stay still and sit in this space of discomfort and disorientation and wonder what it might be offering us. And actually, speaking of the Five of Cups, which traditionally, we know is grief and loss and also shame, I tend to also point out that sometimes with this card, people can't turn around because they are experiencing a significant amount of shame because they don't feel like they deserve those two remaining cups. And to quickly move someone past that can actually do more harm than good. And so if we're thinking about this through the lens of grief and loss and shame, when we're talking about all of that, the platitudes that we often say are nice. Sure, condolences are great. But really sitting with someone in their pain and in their discomfort and in their disorientation is actually what is going to be the most helpful. let this person sit with you in silence. Let this person tell you stories about those 3 cups that have spilt. Let them exist in the liminal. In fact, this reminds me of how Harbin also talks about integration and how when we collectively think about integration, it kind of assumes that there's some, kind of perfectly oriented experience or identity just waiting for us to discover it or put it together. And disorientation, in her view, actually suggests that maybe everything kind of deserved to fall apart, and we shouldn't be so quick to immediately put it back together or reassemble or assemble something new. And I was thinking about this also through the lens of both the Tower and the Five of Cups, and how some folks who relieve high control religions or abusive relationships or just rigid family systems are suffering a very specific type of loss and disorientation. And it's not even necessarily about no longer kind of trusting your internal sense of self or your internal compass, rather. I was trying to find the word. It's about deconstructing or letting the systems and the narratives crumble and experiencing an entirely different mental system than before, and knowing that the lens through which they experience the world is completely shattered really feels like the epitome of disorientation. And during this time when someone is leaving a life that maybe was all they knew, there are months and years that follow where they are trying to reconcile that the old narrative, the old story, the old knowing no longer exists, while also trying to reconcile with the fact that there's no new identity or map or story yet either. And so it can kind of feel like we're just aimless or lost or broken. And as humans, we don't want to feel that way. We want to quickly fix things. But then this reminds me of how important trusting the process is. When you start therapy, for example, there's usually a saying that a lot of therapists share to their clients that they need to trust the process. And sometimes when somebody is like deep in the thick of discomfort, they can't really comprehend what that means. Trust the process. And when I say trust the process, it's knowing that this journey that you're about to experience might sometimes feel like you're aimless. It's kind of like if there are any artists listening. I paint with watercolor, and painting with watercolor is like the ultimate trust the process because there are many phases that happen when you are using watercolor. And if there are any watercolorists out there listening right now, I know I can hear you giggling in my head right now because you know where I'm about to go with this. There are multiple phases, and you usually start with, if you're doing the wet on wet technique, you're wetting your paper. Well, and before that, maybe you'll do like a rough outline or sketch, or I tend to paint landscapes. So I usually start with like a horizon line. And then I'll wet the paper. And so the paper needs to be wet first. And then you're putting the watercolor on this wet paper. And because of that, it is going to be moving in directions that you don't usually have control over. Like you use some control, but not much. And watercolor is a series of layers as well. And so often there comes a point in time where you're just like deep in the ugly phase of a painting and you really want to give up because it doesn't quite look the way that you envisioned it in your head, or it doesn't look like the reference photo that you are using, and you're starting to get frustrated. Can you tell that I've got a lot of experience in this? And you're just like, oh my God, this was such a waste of time and a waste of materials. And why should I even bother? I should just rip it up and toss it. And as a painter, you have to push through because it's just the ugly phase. And sure, not every painting's going to be great. Maybe it'll still be ugly at the end, but it will look so much different than whatever phase you're in now, because there will have been several other layers completed. And so I think that's what's happening here too. When we are in this space of disorientation, we almost have to just trust the process and know that we might just be in the ugly phase right now. And I think especially like in the clinical world, and I see this a lot as a clinician, it's so easy for us to pathologize this specific time of grief and feeling lost. It can easily look like depression, and maybe it is. Two things can be true, but Harbin reframes this slightly differently and thinks that maybe instead it's a moment of moral transformation, which I think is just beautiful and honestly kind of makes me think about the Fool and the Hermit and how they're both setting out on these journeys. And perhaps in between them is the Eight of Cups, because the Eight of Cups always kind of feels like they're on the beginning stages of this journey and, completely unaware of what they're about to face. And same with the Fool, but the Fool would be at the very, very beginning. And then the Hermit's kind of like, yeah, I've been through some shit. And let me tell you. And I feel like the Hermit is the one, kind of holding the lantern and the staff saying like, yeah, just, you got to trust the process. And I think this is why tarot is also so powerful from a therapeutic perspective, from just exploring the human experience, because I think tarot, especially if you're using it the way that I'm discussing it right now, is so comfortable occupying liminal space. And if tarot itself isn't being a disruptor, it's totally comfortable being put in the space of disruptor, because I think not every card introduces insight or gives us clarity. And that can be frustrating. Sometimes it is introducing disorientation. Sometimes it is introducing disruption. And I think that we need to challenge ourselves to stay in that space and say, well, hold on, what does this space offer me? What's here for me? and what kind of altered perspective might I walk away with if I allow myself to hang out in this space? But again, I think that in and of itself is uncomfortable for a lot of folks, because a lot of mental and emotional suffering doesn't necessarily come from ambiguity specifically. It more stems from our intolerance of ambiguity. So then we can move into things like acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a form of treatment that really encourages a willingness to sit with uncertainty without immediately trying to get rid of it. Or you hear me talk about dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, all the time, and how DBT encourages us to hold opposing truths simultaneously. Or narrative therapies, how a narrative approach invites us to look at different personal stories or the most dominating story and sit with it instead of just trying to rewrite it. I mean, even depth psychology acknowledges that certain periods of confusion in our life precede significant moments that kind of propel us towards individuation. And I know I've been talking a lot about this through kind of a singular lens, but Harbin also introduces another dimension to this world of disorientation, because she discusses how not only does it change how we feel, but it also changes the way we relate, which makes so much sense to me as a therapist, because when we experience this disorientation, when we experience a collapse, we become more capable of kind of recognizing the edges of our own reality or the edges of our own perspectives and perceptions. And we become so much more compassionate towards people around us. Usually because it's like, oh shit, like I've been through some shit. And we're forced to take a good, hard, long look at some of our own assumptions. And I think what Harbin mentions or alludes to is that there's a lot of humility that happens in that space. But then thinking about that made me think about something else. I don't know if you can tell, but I am heavy in my philosophy era right now. That is pretty much all the books I've been reading as of late. So I'm just doing a lot of thinking about thinking. And so that got me thinking about the implication that these experiences have on a tarot practice. Because I do think there's this, I mean, what word do I want to use? I guess growing, if not exacerbated, maybe that's a better word, pressure within the spiritual spaces to become the expert, to become the person people seek out. This like, I don't know, like the knower, the person who can explain every symbol or, assign every interpretation or meaning or someone who can predict all the outcomes. I've been seeing that a lot more lately too, actually, which is weird to see that in my feed because it's not how I have curated my algorithm. And this like pressure to, just like kind of have the best advice. And I think that's dangerous. And I think that it again eliminates our ability to think for ourselves and challenge the things other people say and think and do. I've always said that the most meaningful readings that we have leave us with more questions and maybe even leave us more confused than before. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes we need that challenge because that's what increases cognitive flexibility. That's what increases critical thinking skills. Like that is something that we desperately need right now is higher levels of critical thinking. And I think it also reminds us that if we are reading for other people, we need to keep this in mind because someone is coming to you likely because they want the best advice. They want some sort of predicted outcome. They want you to know every sign or symbol and give them some sense of hope. And I'm not saying you shouldn't give them hope, but I do think that being aware of what people are often looking for is important because we could absorb that energy and then we're not staying true to ourselves and maybe we're doing more harm than good. So instead of being somebody who kind of gives into that longing for answers and the perfect advice and the knower of all things, maybe we should be encouraging curiosity, sitting with uncertainty, and allowing space for flexibility. And then thinking about, again, more thinking about thinking about that kind of relationship dynamic between, reader and querent made me think about how, in fact, Harbin discusses this, how we need to move from kind of an individualistic space into a communal space because even disorientation, as she talks about it, it's not just happening alone. It's not just happening in isolation. Because if you understand anything about identities let's just stay with identities right now. If you know anything about identities, then you know that they are socially constructed for the most part. And so when we experience a disorientation through the lens in which Harbin discusses it, that often is tied to a collapse of identity. Anything that is so large and disruptive that we are not sure what that means for us moving forward, that means part of our identity has been shaken. And the collapse of that identity requires a significant amount of relational support. And this leads into something that I share with clients often, how there's only so much cognitive work you can do. There's only so much talk therapy that will help before you have to actually start having new experiences in order to start to feel better or experience a transformation in your life. We can't think our way into a new a new life, a new identity. We have to experience ourself to it. So that means actually going out and having new experiences. And this is completely supported by decades of research in the fields of psychology and psychotherapy that discuss how healing occurs collectively and relationally through those experiences. And I think that's why I've, over the last several years been, which is weird for me because I'm, despite what it seems like on the outside, I'm actually pretty introverted. But I have felt the need to make sure that there are communities that exist that mimic what I'm talking about and how valuable these communities are when they prioritize collective dialogue over, one person's perceived abilities or one person's, advice or systems or whatever. And for me personally, I don't ever want to belong to or exist in or create a community that does not center everybody. I think when we start to just center singular people or a singular thought or belief or system, that's when we start to collapse societally, relationally. Yeah. So, when we are encouraging kind of this mixing, which is very temperance-like, of different thoughts and beliefs and systems and elevating different voices and encouraging new perspectives and making room to hear other people's lived experiences and or ways that they use the cards. That's when we are collectively functioning best and growing and increasing resilience when everything is like coexisting and merging and flowing together. And the cards are in this case are conduits for collectively exploring multiple ways of understanding ourselves and the human experience. And this is when, trusting the process of disorientation becomes so powerful, because when you allow yourself to, as part of the process, step into spaces like that or cultivate spaces like that, your outcome, your prognosis, the kind of end of the process is probably going to feel a lot better. So I did not expect to ramble this long on this topic. I had some bullet point notes of what I wanted to explore, and I just took off in several different directions. So thank you if you've made it this far, thank you for letting me ramble about that. So, but this is an episode on a collective reading. So what did I do with all this information? Well, several months ago, I actually created a spread while I was in the midst of reading Harbin's work. And I've been honestly making my way through the book over several months, along with a couple other books, because if anyone's ever read philosophy books, they're not light reads. They're not easy. I'm constantly Googling words. What does this word mean? And I'm trying to understand how things fit together. So several months ago, whatever kind of section or part of the book I was in, I was super inspired and created a 3-card spread that I had posted to Instagram as well. And I called it the reorientation spread. So that's what we're going to be doing today. It's a 3-card spread. So if you want, grab your cards, pause me really quick, grab your cards, and we can pull together. So 3 cards. First question is, where in my life do I feel unsettled, uncertain, or without clear direction? Card 2 is, what possibilities for growth or insight might this disorientation contain? And then card 3 is, how might this experience be reshaping my sense of self? So because this is about disorientation, I'm using a deck that often feels disorienting to me. And that is my Earth Magic deck. It's by Daniel Martin Diaz. Let me make sure I'm getting that right. Yeah, Daniel Martin Diaz. So yeah, I don't know what it is about this deck. It just feels very powerful energetically to me. Every time I use it, I'm just like, oh, ow, that hurts. I don't like it. So that's what we're using today. And I don't know if I'm going to spend too much time going in depth here. We're just going to see what happens. So again, card 1 is, where in my life do I feel unsettled, uncertain, without clear direction? And we have, oh my God. I'm telling you, y'all, this deck, I have never felt some type of way about this deck. It kind of freaks me out sometimes. And you know how practical I am with the cards. So I pulled the Tower. You cannot make this shit up. Oh my God. I was not expecting that. You've got to be kidding me. I pulled the Tower. Okay, well, let's talk about it, even though I pretty much just talked about it for the last 30 minutes. Oh God. Like, this is so general too. Okay. But I do want to point out a couple things, because even though, this card is nods to Rider-Waite Smith, this particular Tower I love because there are still the two figures falling. One is an angel, and I can't really tell if there are wings on the other one. No, I don't think so. But there's a person cloaked, walking on like a plank, like you would see on like a pirate ship, off the side of this burning tower, almost as if maybe either they're about to jump themselves or they have pushed the other two people. So I'm not sure, but I do think this is very riveting imagery, because if this person is about to jump, then that means the areas in your life that you are feeling unsettled, uncertain, or without clear direction are areas where you know that you need to leave, or you need to change, or you need to completely fuck shit up and jump off this plank. Not literally, by the way. Let's not do that. That's not what I'm saying. Or if we're looking at it through the lens of this person is not going to be jumping off this plank and is the person who pushed the other figures, that's interesting too, because that's almost saying you've basically, just for lack of a better word, pushed people, things, ideas, beliefs, narratives out of your life that no longer serve you. But now you're alone on the edge of this plank thinking, well, now what? Where do I go? What do I do? So yeah, I mean, it's pretty general and like pretty straightforward. And I'm honestly like kind of taken aback that that's the card I pulled. I'm not really sure what else to do with that. Let's keep moving forward. So card 2 is, what possibilities for growth or insight might this disorientation contain? Oh, okay. We have the King of Wands. This is so weird, by the way. So I'm telling you, I don't know what it is with this deck. When I first obtained this deck, I pulled the King of Wands, I think 5 or 6 times in a row. I mean, and I shuffled the hell out of this card. I could not escape the King of Wands. It was like the soul of this deck. I actually love that it's in the position of, what possibilities for growth or insight might this disorientation contain? Because when I'm looking at it next to the Tower, oftentimes when we become so entrenched in a way of being or a way of life, and we're finally ready to literally or metaphorically push it off a plank and into a fire, or whatever it may be, we suddenly open the floodgates to our own creativity. And oftentimes we don't realize, so just to use Harbin's theories, how much creative energy and just creative life force exists within us during the space of disorientation. So if there are any artists listening, you probably can relate to your best work has emerged from pain and moments when you have felt disoriented. So that's what this feels like to me. Seeing these two cards together is, oh yeah, like what sort of masterpiece am I ready to create? Even though maybe I'm scared to like take this leap and, shake things up and feel disoriented. But often in the space of disorientation is when we do our best work, when we are most creative, when maybe we're also, if we give ourselves permission to be most curious and willing to experiment with something that maybe we wouldn't have experimented with prior, because before the disorientation, we were existing in a very specific identity. And when that identity has been stripped from us, we have the opportunities to try all kinds of new things on. And I feel like that's what the King of Wands is talking about now. Like, hey, it's time to try on all these different ideas or ways of being or pathways. Like, it's also a part of the process. Some of them are going to look good and sound good and feel good, and some of them aren't. All right, let's move on to card 3. I cannot believe how long this episode is becoming. I'm so sorry. I have fully intended for this to be like a very short, brief 20-minute episode. I'm like in the midst of the Summer Solstice Summit right now. So I'm exhausted, but I really wanted to get this recorded for you all for July. And so I was like, oof, are y'all going to be able to tell that I'm not like fully showing up? But you can blame the Summer Solstice Summit energy that has fueled me because clearly the creativity is flowing right now. All right. So last card. How might this experience be reshaping my sense of self? We have the Chariot. Okay. So we have 2 majors. Interesting. Oh my gosh. I cannot tell you the last time I pulled the Chariot. I mean, oh my God. It could very well be a year or more the last time I have pulled the Chariot. Like, I almost forgot this card existed. I can't remember exactly where I read this. I know it was in a book somewhere, but it talked about, and I'm not quoting, so I'm just trying to remember, but at least the way my brain filed it, spoke about how the Chariot is like the course correct card. And that always kind of struck me as interesting because I think traditionally we view it as like, obviously like the willpower card and someone who feels very strong and certain in their direction. And I had never thought of it through the lens of them course correcting. And perhaps they're in the state of kind of being sturdy and powerful and having control over, this vessel that is propelling them forward. I had never previously thought about it coming from, or maybe I never thought about where they were before. And that's immediately what came to mind as I'm thinking about this spread and these 2 cards, the Tower, which is so hilarious for where in our lives we feel unsettled. And then the King of Wands for what possibilities for growth or insight emerge. And then the Chariot showing up for how this is reshaping our sense of self. I think it's saying, in terms of our sense of self, we're probably going to feel more confident knowing that even amidst disorientations and disruptions and tower moments, like we still have the ability to figure out and course correct what the next phase or path or journey looks like. And I think that's really important to remember because when we're allowing ourselves to sit in that space of disorientation, like Harbin had recommended, it can sometimes feel like we will be aimless forever. And that is incredibly uncomfortable. And what Harbin was saying, like maybe we need to increase our tolerance with. And the Chariot, I think in this case, is a reminder that regardless of how long we've been in that space of disorientation, we still have the ability to course correct. Thank you so much for listening to the Tarot Diagnosis. For more tarot and mental health content, follow the Tarot Diagnosis on Instagram. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode and sign up to receive the Tarot Diagnosis emails where you'll have access to exclusive spreads and exciting announcements. To join an incredible community of tarot and psychology enthusiasts, join the Tarot Diagnosis membership community, The Symposium, by visiting thetarotdiagnosis.com.